Jake, when the moment comes when the Biden press office decides to step out of the shadows and start tweeting, not just tweeting in favor of things that Joe Biden's done, but starts employing meme politics. They went for the Dark Brandon meme. That's how you know that the White House is on its high horse. There it is. Dark Brandon is crushing it. It's right there on Twitter. That's Andrew Bates from the White House press office. There was the guy who runs digital strategy over there, Rob Flaherty. He also did a Dark Brandon meme. That is a White House that a few months ago was like, oh my God, we're getting crushed, and now is feeling its oats. Tell us how what you're hearing up on the Hill and how it all came together to put them in this position that no one thought they'd be in just a few weeks ago.
Are you going to give me all hour to run through this story? No, I think a few things worth considering here, John. Number one, this is a much needed victory. I mean, for the president, number one, for Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. And it's been, I mean, you have to admit, no matter what party you're in or what side of the aisle you're on, this has been nothing short of a incredibly productive 6-week stretch for Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. And you have to give much, if not all, of the credit to Schumer. And I'm not belittling the White House here, but the president has found, I think actions speak louder than words here. I think the White House has found that when that Biden is most productive when he's not acting, as they say, as the 101st senator. I know Biden has the inclination and the urge to be involved in every legislative debate and to negotiate as he did a couple decades ago or a decade and a half ago when he was in the Senate. But that is not useful. And there is a dynamic here on Capitol Hill among Democrats. There was this dynamic. Joe Manchin got back in line and cut this deal after 18 months of hemming and hawing over it. And that was the spark here. But if you look at all of the other deals, the CHIPS bill, the PACT Act, NATO, Sweden and Finland joining NATO, infrastructure, this was all generated by rank and file members of Congress. That is a marked difference, John, from what we've seen in the last two presidencies, the Trump presidency and the Obama presidency, which were, I mean, to the extent the Trump presidency was anything, I guess, but those were much more top down. So it's a massive victory for the president. But I agree with what the Post said there. I mean, we don't know. And Schumer said yesterday he has no idea whether voters will feel any of this before Election Day. He said they might feel some, they won't feel all. But it is a momentum shift in the sense that Democrats are leaving D.C. or have left D.C. with a pep in their step.
Yeah, Caddy, we'll get to the politics of it in a second. Obviously, it's super important to how is this going to play out. But look, Jake made the point that Joe Biden, who by instinct and inclination wanted to be the 51st senator. I was in that place for 35 years. I know how to make deals in Congress. For him we say he's undisciplined. People say that all the time. But it seems to me that having realized that being the 51st senator, the 51st Democratic senator, the 101st senator, whatever, was not working for him, he decided that he was going to do something much more disciplined. He decided he was going to go against his instincts and let Chuck Schumer take the lead on this, knowing that the credit would ultimately rebound to him and to the party if he could get it done. I think that speaks that discipline and Joe Biden are not two words that normally go together. But in this case, I think it's one of the most obvious, fought his own instincts, and it paid off.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to have done. When he was getting heavily involved in it the first time around with the Build Back Better Act, tweeting about it regularly, talking about it regularly, it didn't get anywhere. It didn't seem to work. Now, I don't know whether that's a direct result of Joe Biden getting involved or whether it's a direct result of the fact that the first time around the bill was just too big for Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin to be able to stomach. And this was a bill that they could work with, particularly because the climate change aspect of this is much more carrots than it is sticks. And that's something that Manchin felt that he could get along with. But whatever it was of those two, it's been passed. And it's hard to see how Biden himself doesn't benefit from this, whether that will mean he can carry on being disciplined, let's see. But he will benefit from this. It may not, as Chuck Schumer said, have a material impact on voters in terms of their pocketbooks by November, but you're already seeing signs that young voters in particular, and Joe Biden was really in the tubes with young voters, only 1% approval rating just last month amongst voters under the age of 30. This is really matters to them. This is a huge issue for voters under the age of 30, and it'll benefit Democrats, but it's hard to see how it doesn't benefit the president as well.
Mike, I'm obviously want to talk to you about politics, and I promise, before this block is over. But first, I just want to step back and I want to just put up this list. You guys put up the full screen here of the consequences of the Biden presidency, what he's actually gotten done here. Democratic achievements in 2021 and 2022. American Recovery Act, $1.9 trillion. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, $550 billion. The CHIPS and Science Act, $280 billion. The Inflation Reduction Act, once known as Build Back Better, now about $700 billion. All of those numbers coming from Politico. You know, there's been a lot of rancor. A lot of people said when it looked like Build Back Better was dead, I'll take the blame. I said this. I said, you know, Joe Biden was nuts to talk about how he'd get all this stuff done, how he could be like LBJ or be like FDR with the narrow margins he has in the House and Senate. He'll never pull that off. That was crazy. And now you look at that list. I mean, I don't know that I compare him to FDR or LBJ, but some people I'm sure will. And I'm curious what you think about how it, as a matter of substance, how the Biden presidency in these first 2 years now stacks up that we see this list of what got done.
Well, Johnny, I've got whiplash. I'm a political hack, but I'll try to talk substance because you make a good point. I think historians will look at this and say the Rodney Dangerfield presidency, and you kids can look that up, the don't get no respect presidency is over. He's actually delivered a lot of stuff. The political question, and some of these things were bipartisan, the infrastructure, the CHIPS deal, they're both huge. Right. So he deserves a lot of credit in a time where bipartisan accomplishment's nearly impossible. He did it. He did the magic trick. Now the question is the politics of it. And you got to remember that list, while impressive on a serious basis, in campaign world, Republicans and right of center independents don't measure success by spending levels. How many billion of this, how many billion of that, particularly when there's inflation going on. So I think the good news for Joe Biden is one, and my friends on the panel have mentioned this, the Democrats have been in such a funk so long of terrible polling data and a guillotine blade hanging over them in November politically. Now at least they can make eye contact with voters. That's a big, useful change. But will it penetrate the rage of gas prices, which I know are going down, but still high, groceries, inflation? Yep. I don't know. You know, he'll get better press in Washington. It won't be the same old, he can't tie his shoes or pass anything. That'll all go away. But out in voter world, it takes a while. And at least they've got something to fight with now, which they didn't have before. Now, did they know how to fight? Did they know how to communicate? Big open question.
So, Jake, I want to ask you, you're up there on Capitol Hill and you're waving your hand. I see you there. Don't worry. I'm getting to you. The question you obviously want to follow up on Mike, but I'll just frame it this way. I mean, that is obviously, you guys want to talk about the politics, and so do I. You make another, let's make a little list up here, another one of these full screens up here. The things, this is from Politico's playbook. Okay. The scope of the issues that are addressed in this bill, notable: the pandemic and its economic fallout, highways, bridges, broadband rail. This is the totality of Joe Biden's domestic achievements. Manufacturing, science, prescription drug prices, health insurance, climate change, deficit reduction, and tax equity. He also expanded NATO, passed new gun safety law, passed a bill to address the effects of vets exposed to toxic burn pits. 5 out of 7 of these laws, all but 2 of the big ones, the ARP and the IRA, received significant Republican support. Again, Joe Biden mocked for saying that he would be able to do things on a bipartisan basis. Mocked, said, you don't understand politics now in 2020, in the Trump, post-Trump era. You are out of it, dude. There'll never be bipartisanship anymore. A lot of those things, some degree of bipartisan support. How does that look from the perspective of people on Capitol Hill who are all running for re-election in the House, many of them running for re-election in the Senate? How do they, when you talk to members, they say, I'm going to go home and lean in on this. On what? What are the things they want to lean in on? What are the things they think will be useful? And what do they think may be less useful, except as, making these laundry lists as we're doing here?
A few thoughts here. Number one, some of this was a perfect storm. I mean, the CHIPS bill is something that is literally bringing massive chips factories into people's states and people's districts. That is that is just the easiest thing to brag about. I think a lot of people are going to talk about that. Same for infrastructure. I mean, these were things that had bipartisan support because they really weren't traditionally partisan. And by the way, I'm one of the people who said he probably wouldn't get a lot of things done on a bipartisan basis. And I was probably wrong on that. I mean, that's a fair criticism of us. I do think that some of this was driven, I think most of it, as I said, was driven by Capitol Hill. I mean, we'll have to see how they message or how they talk about this bill, and also the cross currents of what's happening on inflation. I was just on the phone with a House Democrat a couple minutes ago who said, tell me what it looks like in October. Is gas still going down? Is inflation still going down? Are jobs reports still good? Are people feeling better about the economy? Remember, I mean, the most recent poll I saw had 80-something% of voters saying the country was in the wrong direction. I mean, heading in the wrong direction. That's an astounding number. That's just a huge number. And I'm not sure if they'll be able, as you noted in your opening, John, I'm not sure that they'll be able to overcome both that and the general, historical trends that in the first midterm of a president's term, the party in power typically loses between 25, I think 26 seats on average in the House, and we'll have to see what happens in the 50-50 Senate. But I'm not sure there's a neat explanation for why all these bipartisan things passed and what they're going to do when they go home and talk about it. But I mean, there are easy things for both parties here to talk about: bridges and roads, infrastructure, and chips factories with millions of jobs coming to states across the country. Those are all great things to talk about. And Democrats will talk about the fact that they made drugs cheaper. Drugs on Medicare are going to get cheaper. I mean, these are not small issues. These are big issues that, as you noted, have been in the works for a very long time on Capitol Hill.